What is up, everybody? I'm NoLucksGiven here with your afternoon snap, and today's video is really about Kang. I was looking through my favorite games that I played yesterday with this Agatha Loki list with White Palace as the featured location, and I realized that most of my favorite games involved Kang. Now, this game in particular doesn't really involve Kang. I just wanted to have this here while I talked about the deck. If you didn't see it happening yesterday, a lot of people were playing Agatha. And as soon as I saw the featured location yesterday, I tweeted a picture of White Palace and I said, I don't think people are going to like today's featured location, because I realized very quickly that this was going to devolve into basically Ego as the featured location, as many people would just decide to play Agatha, because it's very, very strong to be able to control your opponent's plays. And if you build around the Agatha yourself, there's plenty of ways to get around it. And that's what we're looking at here. My opponent is an Agatha deck. We can tell that because they gave me an Agatha, and we gave them an Agatha, which means that my morph is twice as likely to hit Agatha. Now, it's not going to be twice as likely once they discard their own Agatha with Lady Sif, but we are still able to get lucky there and hit our Agatha with the morph, which I thought was really sweet. And then I'll Loki the Agatha away, both of the Agathas, which is why I like Loki. My opponent is still under Agatha control because they only discarded one of their Agathas, but we get rid of both of them with Loki, and then luckily we didn't get another Agatha with our Loki, because that can be the downside of Loki. Sometimes you just get another Agatha with it. So because of that, I don't really want to just play Loki out on turn 5. I could, but if I do that, I risk getting Agatha again from the Loki, so I'm looking for other alternate plays to make, and Ronan the Accuser off Loki here was another card. This was, again, from the Safety Blade article that I mentioned yesterday, so a lot of people were playing Ronan yesterday as well, so I'll just drop Ronan and then Quinjet to make these cards in my hand a little bit cheaper for the final turn. I'm also realizing that I can Legion into White Palace, which will turn off the Nexus, but it will put 2 more Agathas in everybody's hand, or 2 more cards in everybody's hand, which will pump up the Collector, but that doesn't really help me that much because my opponent also has 2 Collectors out there, and I have a bunch more power in the Nexus. But my opponent is not guaranteed to drop Agatha in the Nexus, and honestly, even if they do, they're not getting that much power from it. We'll still be winning this game just because we've got Ronan plus Agatha over in the Nexus, and we know that all my opponent can do on this final turn of the game is drop Agatha, so it is going to be a win. I'm going to try to do this all in one take here and move along. I think my opponent just wound up retreating on that one, so we'll speed it along here. Didn't really matter what I did, really, but yeah, I wound up not personally trying out the discard packages because, as you saw in that game, one, you can get like multiple Agathas, and when you get that, which I feel like is more likely to be the case with so many people running Agatha today, you're not going to be able to make use of your Ebony Blade or your Ghost Rider to get that Agatha back into play, so I just didn't bother. This game is a pretty silly one. All of the rest of the games are going to feature Kang, though this game doesn't really feature Kang. I just thought this was a fun game, to be totally honest. Kang is in this game. We're going to wind up drawing it here eventually, but it's not really a Kang game, and the reason for that is actually mostly, well, it's partially because of Morph, and then also partially because of Bar Sinister as one of the locations here. But Morph also gives you information about what's in your opponent's hand, in this case specifically Professor X, and when I drop Loki into Bar Sinister on turn 4, there's really only one play for my opponent this game, and that's going to be to play Professor X into Hala on turn 5. Now, unfortunately, I can't really play around that. I'm Lokified, so I'm just going to be dropping Loki into Bar Sinister, but my opponent does not yet realize I'm going to kick their butt with Collector plus Professor in Superflow. That's going to be an incredible amount of power. Collector's going to get up to 22 power as I Loki my hand away 5 times. Also, or 4 times. They drop Mrs. Marvel on turn 4, that's not really going to be that great for them. I would have loved this hand, by the way, Alioth, Mrs. Marvel. I would have definitely won the game if I was able to keep that one, but I'm going to recycle through it a few times and not going to wind up with either of those cards. Mrs. Marvel, very awkward for my opponent because there's no real way for them to control the side lanes here. And then I do draw Kang off the top on turn 5, so I do slam it down, and I will say Kang does do something relevant this game, which is dig me one card deeper into my deck. And I didn't talk about this yesterday. I talked about this months ago when Kang first came out as alternate uses for Kang, but Kang draws me one card deeper, which allows me to find Arrow, which is now it's the highest power card that I can play this turn. I was trying to see if some other combination could be reasonable, but no, the play is just Arrow plus Nebula, which will actually tie up Hala with my opponent playing Professor X there this turn, as Nebula is going to get 2 more power next turn. So now they have to play something into Bar Sinister 3 times that will beat my differential that I have in the Superflow. If they move over Jeff into Superflow, they stay at 13 power because Nebula goes up by 2, Jeff makes it go up by 3, and then they lose the Mrs. Marvel buff. So they've got to play something for more than 6 power in Bar Sinister to win. And it has to be a whole bunch more than that even, because they need to beat my differential in the Superflow. So they needed to play a card for like 10 here or something, right? Plus 4, plus 4, plus 4 would have been 12. Yeah, they needed to play a card for 10 this turn. Iron Lad misses, so we wind up tying in 2 locations and winning in the 3rd. So I won't say that was like a huge game for Kang, but it's definitely still relevant when Kang is able to dig you 1 card deeper because you draw it on turn 5, and that opens up some more play possibilities. The other thing that Kang is cool for, and I brought this up in yesterday's video, but just a card that gets out of your hand is sometimes beneficial, because when your hands are controlled by Agatha, then it's just going to give you more likelihood to play Loki. We'll look at a few more games with Kang. This one is kind of an interesting game. I don't have Loki to get rid of Agatha, but we do have Titan, which will allow me to play Agatha on turn 5, which means on turn 6, I'm going to be in control. And my opponent Black Widows me here, so I don't really have too many options for things I could do. I was just super grateful that the Widow's Bite did not land in Bar Sinister, because Agatha is going to have a 50-50 to go in Bar Sinister since she can't go in the big house. So that is one saving grace. I've probably won Bar Sinister. I just have to try to win one of these other 2 locations if possible. So turn 4, we'll see what my opponent does here. I could scroll ahead a little bit. Okay, Mrs. Marvel. Pretty straightforward turn 4 play. That knocks my Iron Lad Silk over into Bar Sinister, which means I kind of get scammed a little bit out of some Agatha power. I'm only getting 2 Agathas, and that makes me potentially beatable in Bar Sinister even. My opponent plays Super Scroll plus Korg into the 5th turn of the game, and then on turn 6, we are going to draw Kang, because this is a Kang video, like I said. So I'm going to lead off with Kang. I'm going to snap, play Kang, pretty straightforward play for the final turn, boomer snap, and play the Kang out. That way we can see what my opponent's doing. I play Kang into Bar Sinister, since it is the least likely location for my opponent to play Cosmo into. So that will allow me to most likely not just completely throw the game and get the Kang activation off, and then we can see what my opponent is working with and see if we can come up with some other plays. This is also a Kang off the top, this time on turn 6, which means we will draw an additional card deeper into our deck, so that could potentially help us as well. It will shrink Darkhawk. That's kind of a nice little synergy there, not to spoil it. And my opponent eventually comes up with the line of dropping Onslaught into that center location. So what can we do now? Well, let's rewind the turn and take a look at our options. Claw, Red Skull, Arrow, Spider-Woman, Silk. Probably don't want to Claw, though. They're not going to beat me in Bar Sinister regardless. and I draw a rock off the top of my deck. But if my opponent onslots their Super Scroll, copying my Red Skull twice, that would be pretty sweet. That would leave me with an 18 power Red Skull and a 4 power rock, 22 power in that center location. That's going to beat my opponent's 14, and seems like a pretty sweet play to me. So I'm snapping, and we are going to see what we can come up with that option. Now, this game's a little bit weird. My opponent decides to deviate from that plan by making a slightly different play here. They go Darkhawk into Bar Sinister. Maybe it's a bot. Darkhawk into Bar Sinister really makes no sense, especially with how small our deck is. And then they play Shadow King over into the big house. Red Skull plus Rock still actually going to win in Titan, so it doesn't really matter. But it would have been an incredible play with Kang there if we were able to steal that game with Onslaught. My opponent emotes, so maybe they weren't a bot. But yeah, a little bit of an asterisk on that one because my opponent changed their play. Most of the time people are going to change their plays with Kang, right? But that is kind of why I'm making this video. Because what I think a lot of people maybe didn't pick up on is Agatha is just RNG. You're just playing an RNG game. And that's interesting to note because Kang doesn't re-roll any RNG that happens during a turn. If you play a card into Tarnax and Kang happens the next turn, if the same card is played into Tarnax in the same order, the RNG is the same, and the card's going to turn into the same thing. Now, we're not looking at that in this game. This is an Agatha game. But why that is super important is Agatha is also RNG. We're not actually going to look at any Kang into Tarnax RNG in this game. It's all going to be about Agatha RNG and how Kang interacts with that. We get really lucky here because my Agatha plays itself first off my opponent's wave, which means on turn 5, I'll be able to play my opponent's Agatha because it's discounted from Quinjet. So we do get a little bit lucky in that regard. I get a little bit unlucky though in that I play my Agatha into Tarnax though. So did my opponent, so I guess it's fair. And then my Agatha is going to turn into Eliath, which I guess was reasonable. We killed my opponent's card, don't know what they were doing there. But here's where things get cool. I can play Kang, and this will tell me where my opponent is going to play Agatha this turn, because this is RNG. So my opponent is locked into this play. They are Agatha locked. So now I know on the final turn of the game, they're going to be playing Agatha into Xandar. And that just allows me to beat my opponent in Xandar. I will be able to drop my vision there, and that will grab the win. Could also play the arrow. I didn't know how arrow would work if it would drag over the Hell Carrier. So I didn't want to risk that, even though no, I guess that would make me lose. No, but then I'd win in Tarnax. So it probably would have been fine. I wanted to do the safe play. I Kanged, I got perfect info, I know where Agatha's coming, so I'm gonna vision and beat my opponent there. And that is like, how can you ask for more with Kang? Locking your opponent into a specific play just makes Kang so sweet with this deck. We are gonna take a look at one final game though here to wrap out this video. Forget what this game is. I'm trying to do all of this as quickly as I can. I've got limited time today. And we are up against somebody with an Agatha avatar. So we know that it is an Agatha Spider-Man matchup here. We've got Elysium to play out Agatha on turn 5 potentially. My opponent's going to kick things off with Collector plus Black Knight. So definitely looking at an Agatha mirror with Loki and discard packages in my opponent's deck. No plays on turn 2 for myself. My opponent will have some plays though. They're going to play Quinjet plus Lady Sif. Okay, yeah, so my opponent gets out of the Agatha lock and gives themselves an Ebony Blade. But then do we White Palace them? No, we don't White Palace. So I'm Agatha locked and my opponent is not. Well, that's definitely a good reason to play Lady Sif, just more ways to get out of Agatha. My opponent doesn't have a turn 3 play because they already dumped all of their cheap cards. And on turn 4, I will just be playing Arrow. That will gunk my opponent up in Great Web, whatever they play this turn. Legion, okay, Legion Elysiuming everything is going to allow me to drop Agatha and then another card even on turn 5, so that's kind of fun. I'm going to snap to that. We'll also play Morph here for free, and it looks like I'm also going to decide to play Red Skull. So we'll see how this one goes. My opponent can probably dump a decent amount of their hand, and looks like they do. They just dump their whole hand here. Ghost Rider hits Agatha, Ebony Blade for 14, and Loki giving them 1 card. Okay, Loki gave them 1 card here. They still had 1 card left, and this is going to be tough. Now, my opponent doesn't have many cards, and this kind of confused me at the start. Morph turned into Morph. That means that Morph is the final card in my opponent's hand. But we can Kang, and we can see what other card they draw off the top of the deck is for this final turn with Kang, and that gives me a pretty good insight into what my opponent is hoping to do on this final turn of the game. Their Morph hits my Claw, which means they're probably pretty likely to play it there again, and they don't have any other option but to play Ronin in the center. But because Elysium is all 3 locations, I'm going to be able to drop my entire hand here. And I think in most scenarios, you would look at this and you'd say, okay, I'm down by 20 points in every single location. I probably got to get out of this one. But my opponent, I know, is not going to have that same output on this final turn. They clawed and they Ronin'd, but they're not going to be able to copy that Claw because I'm going to dump the Claw out of my hand, and they're not going to be able to Ronin for more than 5 power because I'm going to dump everything out of my hand. So Morph is going to copy nothing just like mine did, and then I will throw down a Vision and a Spider-Woman plus the Claw to flip Elysium. And what do you know? Kang actually has some viability. That's going to be it for me today. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'm NoLucksGiven. Peace.